it was forced out of them that it showed that the British government knew we were being tortured and was sending agents of the MI5, MI6, and questions to us while we were being tortured.
Hello, salams and greetings to everyone tuning in. I am Yvonne Ridley, and this is my first podcast with WTX News. Each week, I'll be taking a look at some of the hot topics thrown up around the world, and today's focus is on political prisoners, who they are and where they're being held and why. You might be surprised by some of the interviews. For instance, did you know that this month marks the 20th anniversary of the opening of the Gulag, which is known as Guantanamo Bay, the US detention facility? Its grim legacy is marked by the detention of nearly 800 men and boys, the majority of them held without charge, without trial, and going through years of torture and other cruel and inhumane treatment. And talking of anniversaries, did you also know that the world's longest serving political prisoner has just chalked up his 40th year behind bars? Now imagine that, 40 years. I mean, when you consider the world's most famous political prisoner, Nelson Mandela, he served just over 27 years in prison. And this guy has chalked up his 40th anniversary this month. Meanwhile, closer to home, my Premier Division football team makes headline news for all the wrong reasons. Find out why Newcastle United is linked to overseas prisoners held by a regime which will jail you for a tweet if they don't like what you send. I also speak to a former inmate who has drawn up prisoners' rights charters after hearing the screams of torture victims in adjoining cells in the Syrian prisons where he was held. And I can tell you, for once, it wasn't the dirty work of the Assad regime. Finally, which country in the world locks up journalists? Well, actually, quite a few. But there's one in particular that made legal history just recently for sending someone down for his court reporting. But today's show opens up with former Guantanamo detainee Moazzam Begg. So let's get his view on the Gulag in occupied Cuba, where he spent nearly 3 years of his life. Salam alaikum, Moazzam, long time no see. Yeah, there's an anniversary that's come up this month, which very few people seem to know about. Can you tell me what it is?
Yes, Yvonne. It's the 20th anniversary since the first prisoners were sent to Guantanamo in those signature orange jumpsuits that the world now has seen, and those notorious images of men kneeling with their faces, their mouths, nose, and ears covered, and US soldiers standing astride and above them. And it's unbelievable because there's still 39 prisoners there, and the majority of whom have either been cleared for release or are in this ridiculous category called forever prisoners, which is, and to quote, they are too dangerous to release, according to the US government, and too innocent to charge. It's this continuation of this kind of black hole that exists. And then there's a handful of people who are facing trial by military commission, And the military commission process itself has been described by many senior jurists around the world as a kangaroo court system. And those facing charges under the military commissions include people like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the alleged mastermind of 9/11, who for 20 years has not been successfully prosecuted for the very reason Guantanamo was set up and the war on terror began in the first place.
Well, what can ordinary people do about this? Because, Barack Obama said he was going to close Guantanamo down. It never happened. Donald Trump said he was going to put more bad people in Guantanamo. It never happened. What about Biden? What's his position?
Well, Biden was the vice president when Obama made that statement that he will close Guantanamo down and had signed the executive order. So it's part of his kind of legacy, as at least as a Democrat. He's expressed that he wants to close it, but then so did President Bush, who opened the place in the first place. And actually, Bush released more prisoners than anybody else, though he put the majority in to begin with. Disturbingly, Biden has only released one prisoner, Abdul Latif Nasser, a Moroccan, since his tenure as president. There have been a whole bunch of prisoners who've been cleared for transfer and or release, and that is promising under Biden. But again, the problem is that there are some prisoners who have been cleared for release. There's one in particular who's been cleared for 10 years, and he's still sitting in Guantanamo. So cleared for release by a series of U.S. State departments doesn't necessarily mean freedom. And just today, I saw a message from Clive Stafford-Smith, one of the lawyers representing some of the Guantanamo prisoners. He spoke of a young man called Jawad Rabbani, who is 19 years old, lives in Pakistan. He has never seen his father in his life because his father is held without charge or trial in Guantanamo. So what we can and should do is, of course, agitate, press the U.S. government for a final closure. We should put pressure on our governments to tell the United States that really this is enough. You cannot be in a moral position to talk to anybody else about human rights violations when you hold people for 20 years without charge or trial after they've been tortured.
Are these political prisoners?
I think the status of these prisoners has gone from, as we were called when I was myself held in custody, from enemy prisoners of war, which lasted literally a day because that would have required giving us rights under the Geneva Conventions, to enemy combatants who have no rights under U.S. law, whoever, like this black hole that's been created in the war on terrorism, to prisoners of conscience, to detainees. Sorry that the term that's been used is still used ridiculously. The term detainees is used. So, though actually they are political prisoners, because in fact I would say, not even political prisoners, I would say that they are just innocent men held without charge or trial for the most part. Those who would be political prisoners who are there for a political cause and said that they are there, for example, as those who fought against the US or wanted something. But the majority are actually not even charged with a crime.
You were one of these prisoners of conscience. Nearly 3 years of your life spent in Guantanamo. Of course, you were completely exonerated on release, and I think the British government even gave a wedge of money to you and other British prisoners. Have you had an apology at all?
No. I mean, the only reason why the British government even gave us anything that would resemble compensation, it was because it was found through, whilst we had to literally drag them through court. They defended themselves at the cost of, I think, 50 odd million pounds with 60 barristers. And it was forced out of them that it showed that the British government knew we were being tortured and was sending agents of the MI5, MI6, and questions to us while we were being tortured. So when this was forced out of them, they capitulated at court and sued for a discussion, or not sued, but actually said that we want to stop you suing us. So yeah, there's been no apology, of course, not from the Americans. There's been nothing to anybody. The only thing that's ever happened is that once, about 10 odd years ago, I met with a former, the former Minister for U.S. Homeland, the Undersecretary for Homeland Security, alongside a U.S. general, and he met with me and some former Guantanamo prisoners. And in private, this guy, he said, he golfs with Bush, and I think he's now the senator of Arkansas, and he said in private that we would like to start the process in which we could start to say sorry. That's as close as it's ever got, I think, to anyone. I've never heard any U.S. official apologize for what essentially are war crimes against the prisoners.
So 20 years on, this gulag, as Amnesty International called it, is still open. The hundreds that have been released are still seeking justice or some form of closure. Good luck with your continued campaigning. I know you're the outreach director for CAGE, an advocacy group which was launched on the back of Guantanamo. Is this a campaign that CAGE is continuing with?
Yeah, so we've just come to the near to the end of something called the International Witness Campaign, that has run from literally September the 11th to January the 11th and beyond. And these two dates, of course, September the 11th is a notorious date when the war on terror kind of began, and January the 11th was when the first prisoners were sent to Guantanamo. So it's this long period of time where we partnered with over 40 different organizations across the world. We've had book festivals, poetry festivals, discussions, debates, former Guantanamo soldiers taking part in those discussions. All, of course, everybody focusing in on how Guantanamo has shaped how the world views the United States of America, and has been a black stain on anyone that claims to defend human rights and freedom. So that's been part of our campaign. We're still doing it. We've just had, over a couple of weeks ago, we had the first time we got together prisoners from all over the world, from Morocco, former prisoners, Canada, Mauritania, the UK, Libya, Turkey, and had a discussion of just former prisoners, which I was honored to host. Many of I know, many of whom I know that you know and have met, and it was just a pleasure to bring these people together to talk about an experience, a period of time that has shaped all of our pasts, presents, and futures.
Well, let's hope that justice is delivered sooner rather than later. Moazzam Begg, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So my first podcast comes to an end. Will it be my last? Well, that's very much up to you. We'd love to hear some feedback of In Conversation with Yvonne Ridley. Any suggestions for future topics or guests, please get in contact. And in the meantime, stay safe and stay blessed.